Fallen Angel, a cross-security investigation, Book 1. Written by G.K.Parks. Narrated by Danny Holt. Chapter 20. When I left my apartment the next morning, a cruiser pulled behind me. It didn't flash its lights or siren, and even when I switched lanes to let it pass, it stayed behind me. It stayed on me all the way to the coffee shop. I stopped at the cafe I frequented most mornings, expecting the patrolman to follow me inside. But he didn't, at least not right away. I ordered my usual and paid for a second cappuccino with extra foam. "That's not for me," I said. "But when the cop comes in here, tell him Mr. Cross treated him to a cup." I picked up the paper cup that would hold his drink and the marker and wrote on it, "Blow me." Then I over-tipped the barista, bought a paper, and took a seat in the back. 10 minutes later, when I didn't come out, the cop came in. It wasn't Scott, just some patrolman he ordered to follow me. The poor guy was just another pawn the sergeant used for his own twisted purposes. He should report his boss for abuse of power, and if he didn't, I would. By the time the cop made his way to the front of the line, the cappuccino was waiting for him. He turned in my direction, and I lifted my own cup, smirking. He read what I wrote on his coffee and glared at me. I raised a suggestive eyebrow, but the patrolman didn't engage. Instead, he went out to his car and drove away. An hour later, I finished my coffee and the crossword puzzle and headed to the office. Since I told everyone to stay away, it didn't matter what time I showed up. Justin had already sent me a dozen texts concerning our new hires, our new clients, and some messages Almeida's office had left him. Today would be another busy day. When I arrived, I noticed my car didn't look quite right. Parking near it, I got out to find all 4 of my tires slashed. Cursing, I looked up, searching for nearby security cameras. Unfortunately, the attack didn't set off my car alarm, or it'd still be beeping, which meant it was unlikely someone noticed who had done this. But I knew who was responsible. I just didn't have proof. Pissed, I entered the office building, spoke to the building security, requested they check their footage to see if anything was caught on camera, and took the elevator up. As soon as I let myself into the office, I picked up the phone and called the police. They assured me someone was on their way. While I waited, I phoned Almeida and updated him on the situation. "Can you prove it was Renwin?" "I doubt it, unless building security performed a miracle." "Okay, in that case, you might want to restrain yourself from pointing fingers until you have proof." "How's Jade settling in?" "She's fine. I'm hoping to get her back to work in a couple of days. Since Renwin's this unbalanced, I'll have the paperwork ready ahead of time in case we need to request an emergency hearing." "If it comes down to that, I want the bastard behind bars." I looked out the window, spotting a police cruiser pulling to a stop in front of my building. "Right now I have to make a report." "Do you want me to stop by?" "I can handle it." "Are you sure?" Almeida asked. "Well, if I can't, I'll call you from lockup." Sergeant Scott Renwin stood beside his cruiser. I approached him, doing my best to feign surprise, but I doubted even a world-class actor could successfully pull off that feat. "You're a cop? I thought you worked construction." I narrowed my eyes at the name tag tacked to his left breast. "Sergeant S. Renwin. Didn't you say your name was Leonard Biggs?" "Sir, we've never met." Hatred poured from his eyes. What's the S stand for, shithead?" Scott pulled a flashlight from his belt and shone it directly in my eyes, which was an asshole move, probably revenge for the shithead comment. "Have you ingested any illegal substances? Maybe you've been drinking." I glared at him. "Sorry. You must just have one of those faces. You look like this crazy bastard I met yesterday, the kind of scumbag who puts hands on a woman to make himself feel more like a man. You know, just a nobody asshole who thinks he can push people around and threaten them into doing whatever he wants." "Oh, so you think you're a tough guy, Mr. Cross?" "How do you know my name if we haven't met?" "From the phone call you placed." "Right." I continued to glare at him as he returned the flashlight to its rightful place on his belt. "What seems to be the problem? I received a call about property damage." I pointed to my car. "I found it like that this morning." "Where were you when this happened?" "Wouldn't you like to know?" Scott squeezed the pen in his hand so hard it bent in half. Exhaling slowly, he crossed the street to inspect the damage. He was on edge, ready to snap just like the pen. I wanted to push him. It was daylight, with dozens of people around. One of them would pull out a phone and record an act of police brutality. As a rule, most people hated cops. I jogged after him. Do you know what they say about men who stab things? They're compensating for their inability to perform in the bedroom.
You should watch yourself, Mr. Cross. It looks like someone blew your tires.
Lucky for me, that's not the first time I've been blown today. Scott clenched his fists and stood. Come on, hit me, I thought. His chest heaved, and he pressed himself against me. I stared expectantly at him, waiting, hoping. An arrogant grin plastered across my face. If I were him, I'd hit me. After 10 seconds, Scott stepped back, focusing on taking down a proper account of the damage. I placed a forearm against the roof of the car and leaned in. Let me make one thing clear. I won't let you lay a hand on her again. You can't scare me, so back off and let her go. You still have a career. You can have a life. Just leave her alone. Renwyn stood up straight and shoved me against the car.
Is that what she told you? Because it's a lie. I never hurt her.
The bruises on her body say otherwise. I looked down at his hands, still pressed against my chest. For someone who claims he isn't violent, your actions make that hard to believe.
Tell me where she is, or a few blown tires will be the least of your problems.
Sorry, that's privileged information.
I could arrest you.
On what grounds? Despite my baser instincts, I didn't struggle or fight back. I had yet to lay a hand on Scott. Unfortunately, the bastard was smart enough to leave his body cam off, and while suspicious and possibly a violation of police regulations, it wouldn't prove any claims I made.
Stalking.
Go ahead. Scott shoved me harder into the car and stepped back. He scribbled down the basis for the call and held it out for me to sign. I took the misshapen pen, signed the bottom, and grabbed the copy he thrust against my chest.
You have a good day. It might very well be your last, he warned.
Chapter 21. I sat at my desk, steaming as I planned a counterstrike. First things first, I had to figure out how Scott discovered Jade had come to me for help. The tracker didn't link back to me, and after making a few calls to some friends at the precinct, I knew he hadn't called in any favors to have the transmitted location traced. Sarah swore she didn't say a word. She also urged me to call my father. Daddy dearest has more important things to worry about, I said.
Lucien, stop being so damn stubborn. Do you have any idea the kind of hell that'll rain down on you? Renwyn is a sergeant. He could send a dozen uniforms to ruin your day.
In that case, I'd like to file a formal complaint.
Lucien,
she sighed, exasperated. No, I'm serious. She mumbled something I couldn't hear.
You'll have to come here to fill out the paperwork.
Great. I'll stop by when I finish work for the day.
Fine, but think about calling your father. If you don't, maybe I will.
He won't help me. He never does. He made his choice a long time ago. Hanging up, I brought up the list of names of people who'd filed complaints against Sergeant Renwyn. Justin had already contacted several of them. They all had similar stories. Scott bullied them, illegally searched their person or vehicle, and used excessive force. Unfortunately, most of them had records for distributing narcotics or engaging in prostitution, which lessened their complaints in the eyes of the police department. The few who didn't failed to follow up or were told the matter was being investigated. So, I'd take a different approach. Maybe I'd go straight to IA. Scott was belligerent and unprofessional. Belligerent. That's one word that popped up repeatedly in his fitness reports and complaints. It fit. I should check the dictionary to see if his photo was next to the definition. While I drafted what I wanted to say, a man entered the outer office.
Knock, knock,
Almeida called.
Anyone here?
In my office. I glanced up as he entered. How'd you get inside? He cocked an eyebrow.
Door was open.
For a moment, I forgot I told my receptionist to take some time off. Right. I pushed away from the desk and rubbed my eyes. I don't think Scott will back off. I told him he needs to leave Jade alone. that this has to stop.
And?
I'm pretty sure he threatened to kill me.
Did you get it on tape?
No.
Witnesses?
I shook my head.
Did you threaten him first?
Not really. Almeida went to the bar in the corner of my office and poured a drink, even though it was barely lunchtime.
Cross, I understand this thing, he waved his hand around the room, is new to you. So let me tell you how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to de-escalate the situation. Do you know what that means?
Sure I do, but it's easier said than done. Scott isn't willing to back off.
All right.
Almeida took a seat in my client chair.
Let's go over the proper steps you need to take.
I already knew what I had to do. From making a formal complaint to documenting every occurrence, I had no intention of filing my own restraining order against the man. This was harassment, stalking, and property damage. Add in the death threats and abuse of power, and, at the very least, Scott would be facing a suspension. At the most, jail time, though Almeida didn't believe we had enough evidence to pursue those charges yet.
What's the bartender's name?
Almeida asked, making notes. Jim Harrelson, former police lieutenant.
And he witnessed Renwyn hit Jade?
He said it was dark. He doesn't want to get involved. But if push came to shove, he would testify. Almeida nodded.
And the waitress, Melody, was it?
Yeah, but I bet most of the staff at KC's have stories to share. Maybe one of them gave me up to Renwyn.
All right. I'll have someone from the firm speak to them and see if this is worth pursuing. I already spoke to your assistant about the people who've launched complaints against Renwyn. Honestly, if we push a little, we could take his job.
We should.
Probably, but my duty is to my client. Your duty is to your client. As soon as I put some things together, I'll reach out to Renwyn's counsel and offer a quid pro quo. I'll stop digging into this, and you'll back off if Renwyn agrees to leave Jade alone. Deal?
And he goes to anger management. Almeida chuckled.
Is that a sticking point for you?
If he wants to keep his badge, it is.
Let me tell you something, Cross. It's not our problem if he does it again. We do our jobs. We do the best we can, and we pass it off. Problems like this are above our pay grades.
No wonder you're a defense attorney.
Yeah, well, it wasn't too long ago you were in need of my services.
Maybe I should have gone to anger management. Then we wouldn't be here now. Almeida laughed.
Regardless, everyone's entitled to equal protection under the law.
Do you believe that?
Sure.
I never knew you were an idealist. The system's fucked. It doesn't work the way it should.
Once again, that's above my pay grade, but I do the best I can to even the odds.
I doubted it, but I kept my mouth shut. Chapter 22. The day was a blur. I rubbed my temples, hoping it would stop the throbbing in my head. Jade came into the living room with 2 mugs of green tea and a squeezable bear. She flipped the bear upside down and poured some honey into her tea before pushing it closer to me. Did Mr. Almeida pick up groceries?
The place came stocked. The bathrooms even have decorative soaps.
I told you this place was nicer. She blushed, stirring her tea anxiously.
About that, I will pay you back. Would it be okay if we set up a payment plan? I'm just not sure yet where I'm going to live. I can probably find a room or roommate, so rent should be more manageable, and once I get back to work, I can pick up some extra shifts and look for a second job.
Stop. It's fine.
Lucien, come on. This is your business. I don't want to be your charity case.
Fine. Pay me back. Don't pay me back. I don't care. Just please. I stared at the spoon. Stop doing that. Abruptly, she released the spoon and put the cup on the table.
I'm so sorry. I didn't mean...
Hey, I said softly. Look at me. It's okay. I just have a headache. It's not a big deal. Honestly, if you wanted to run through the house banging the pots together, I wouldn't stop you. Though I'd appreciate it if you refrained from doing that. She studied me for the longest time, a newfound understanding dawning in her eyes.
I've forgotten what it's like to not live in fear.
I didn't have the heart to tell her what happened today with Scott. We'll figure this out, but you're safe here. The building even has a doorman and its own security guards. Everything will be okay."
You know, I'm starting to believe that.
She let out a breath.
Mr. Almeida says we should be able to get my life back on track soon, and I can stay in the city if I choose.
What do you want to do?
I don't know yet, but I need to save up some money before I make any decisions. Mr. Almeida said I should be able to get back to work in a couple of days, but you moved me here for a reason. At work, I'm a sitting duck. Scott's probably waiting there for me to show up.
That's why your lawyer is offering Scott a truce if he agrees to leave you alone. We'll see what he says. Meanwhile, I just hired a dozen bodyguards who are undergoing training at the moment. Depending on how well they do in class, I might field test them. Would you mind being my guinea pig?
Actually, I'd feel better knowing someone was around. She looked at me with big doe eyes. I thought you might guard me.
I would, but since Scott's figured out you came to me for help, it's not in your best interest. I didn't go into the details of all the precautions I had to take just to get to the apartment. Like Almeida reminded me, my duty was to protect my client, so I was protecting her from the gruesome facts. We fell silent, drinking our tea. I let my head fall back against the plush cushions and closed my eyes, feeling a constant buzz beneath my eyelids. Jade remained silent beside me, and I opened one eye to find her watching me. "Do you have any clue how Scott found out you came to me for help?" I'd exhausted the most likely possibilities. She shook her head. I waited, figuring if the question made her nervous or upset, she'd fidget or stir her tea, but her hands remained steady.
I did everything you said. Do you think he saw your car outside the apartment, or maybe he checked with people at the airport?
Could be.
Is this a problem?
Not really. My 4 popped tires would disagree. It just complicates matters.
I'm sorry.
It's not your fault. Stop apologizing. I rubbed my eyes.
Do you know if there's any aspirin in the bathroom?
Depending on the clients this apartment entertained, a few vials of Coke or a bottle of Oxy could be stashed somewhere inside. Neither of those would help matters in the long run. Short term, they might do in a pinch, but I still had to stop by the precinct, and I didn't need to give Scott any reasons to arrest me. I'd have to be squeaky clean until this was over. Plus, drugs were never my scene, minus an occasional recreational night here or there when work and play blurred into days without sleep.
I'll check.
She uncurled from her spot on the couch and disappeared down the hall before I had time to protest. A moment later, she returned with a bottle of OTC pain relievers.
Migraine?
Just a headache.
I used to get migraines a lot. Stress, probably.
Do you know if you ever had a concussion? She shook her head, uncomfortable with the question.
Probably not. I never hit my head.
Concussions make migraines more likely, or so says an article I read. She slipped behind the couch, and I tilted my head up and looked at her.
When I was little, my mom used to rub my temples whenever I was sick.
Slowly she reached for me, unsure if she should touch me. I didn't move or speak. I didn't want to frighten her. Her fingertips brushed against the sides of my face, and gently she rubbed small circles with her pointer and middle fingers. Why didn't you go back home after things went south with Scott?
I was ashamed.
I'm sorry.
Why are you apologizing?
She asked, hoping to tease me, but her tone wasn't convincing. It wasn't her fault, but no matter how many times someone told her that, she felt guilty, embarrassed, and ashamed for not standing up for herself, for not stopping it, and for letting it go on as long as it did. No one should have to endure that. I'm sorry you did. Gently, I took her hand, and she stopped rubbing my temples. For the first time since we met, she didn't pull away from my touch. She came around the couch and sat beside me, and then she hugged me. Chapter 23. After I left Jade's that night, the chauffeured car took me back to Reeves and Almeida, where I collected my rental car, glad to find it with 4 fully inflated tires. I stopped by the precinct and filed a complaint against Sergeant Renwin for unprofessional and belligerent behavior. No one would take the complaint seriously since Renwin didn't actually do anything I could prove, but we needed to start a paper trail. On my way home, a patrol car pulled me over. The officer wanted to search my vehicle, and I refused to comply. He had no grounds to conduct a search, and at this point I feared what he might plant inside my car. He stared at my license and the rental agreement.
"Your name looks familiar."
He hoped to sound menacing and make me squirm. Instead, I turned the tables on him. "It should. My last name, anyway." I cleared my throat as the "oh shit" look erupted on his face. "That's right. I'm that Lucien Cross."
"I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to inconvenience you. Make sure you report that messed-up turn signal to the rental place when you return the car, and drive safe."
"Will do." He handed back my documents.
"You have a good night. I'm sorry for the misunderstanding."
"You and me both." I planned to make another trip to KC's and drive by Scott's place to see what the bastard was up to. But after the day I had, I was too tired to do anything but sleep. The next morning, I found Scott parked outside my building. He didn't do or say anything, but he drove his truck so I would notice him. He wanted me to know he was watching and waiting. He was planning something, and that's when I realized he thought I stashed Jade at my place. On the bright side, he wouldn't be motivated to look elsewhere, so I set my lights to go on and off at certain times while I was out to convince him his assumption was correct. The longer I maintained the ruse, the safer she'd be. Plus, he didn't have a chance in hell of gaining access to my apartment and learning the truth. Or so I told myself. The rest of the week moved at a crawl. Cross security remained empty. I fielded calls and signed a fourth client. I started on the background checks and combed Mr. Rathbone's servers for data breaches, completing the simpler tasks weeks ahead of schedule. Pleased, Rathbone assigned me another task, assessing his firewall and anti-hacking protocols. Though I'd already tested them when I checked his data security, I did it again. Thursday, I dropped by the training facility and spoke to the instructor I hired. The security personnel passed all recommended requirements: fitness, firearms, first aid, and crisis training. Since they already possessed the necessary skills, this was just a refresher and an introduction to my standards. I briefed them on their upcoming tasks. The best and brightest would spend the next several weeks providing security for Miranda's tour. I spoke to her and said I'd send them over Saturday so they could get acquainted. That left me with 6 people to guard Jade. Deciding to rotate them out to avoid Scott or another police officer recognizing them, I doled out assignments and called it training. I showed them a photo of Scott Renwin and told them to keep their eyes peeled. I also made them painfully aware that they should not consider any police personnel who happened to wander into the diner as an ally, and, if a situation arose, they should call 911 and let dispatch know they were reporting a crime on my behalf. Scott might have wanted to turn the entire police force against me, but my reach was far greater than his. It was one of the few perks of being a Cross. On my way back to the office, Almeida called.
"Renwin doesn't want any trouble."
"Do you believe him? The bastard's been lurking outside my apartment and office all week. I caught him going through my garbage yesterday."
"Did you confront him?"
"No."
"Do you think he'll be able to piece anything together?"
From the confetti I discarded, definitely not.
"Have you encountered any other problems, car or otherwise?"
"No."
"Good."
Almeida paused.
"The complaint you filed must have scared him. Your name carries weight. By now he must have figured that out. I think that's why his attorney gave me his word Miss McNamara would have no further contact with his client. They don't want trouble, and you, my friend, like to cause trouble."
"That's why it's not good for me to get twitchy, and Scott makes me twitchy."
"Then take some diazepam and get over it. It looks like we finally put this thing to bed. I reached out to the women's shelters in the area. They have funds and a network set up. They'll help Jade find a safe place to live, and they offer free counseling."
"Do you think she needs it?" Almeida chuckled.
"You tell me."
I did, but that wasn't my decision. It was hers. Forcing it on anyone who isn't open to it is a waste of time, except in Scott's case. I don't give a shit what he wants. Since he still possesses a badge, he needs to learn the right way of conducting himself in public.
That's the second time you've talked about therapy. I never thought Lucien Cross was this enlightened.
Why not? Almeida practically choked.
It's because you're a little fucked in the head.
That's called drive and ambition.
That's called a chip on your shoulder.
I shrugged and parked the car. I want it on record that I don't trust Scott Renwin.
Noted. But you don't have to trust him. You just have to stop firing shots at him until we find out if he's serious about keeping his distance from Ms. McNamara.
Only time will tell. Right now she's focused on going back to work and overwhelmed by the possibility he might show up. Until we know for sure Scott's backing off, we need to focus on that. I'll have people watching her at the diner. If Scott or any of his buddies show their ugly faces at the diner, there will be hell to pay. For the first time in days, I didn't see the oversized pickup or a police car outside my office. I should have been relieved. Instead, not knowing where Scott was made me panicky. I didn't do well with twitchy, and panicky was far worse. Chapter 24. Days went by. No one spotted Scott at the diner. Jade didn't see him or any of his friends. I kept tabs on him from a distance, not wanting to poke the sleeping beast. Since the hearing, he kept to himself. I sent Justin into KC's to find out what was going on, but my assistant reported back Scott hadn't had a drink in almost a week. According to the agreement, he'd gone to every anger management session. Maybe they told him to stop drinking. Too much alcohol often led to heightened emotional responses and violence, so perhaps that would solve the problem. However, I wasn't optimistic. I recalled my receptionist and assistant back to the office. Despite this hiccup, we still had a business to get off the ground. I scheduled a dozen meetings with potential clients and 3 interviews with tech-savvy applicants. At some point, I'd need more security specialists and analysts, but for now, overextending my resources could be disastrous. Even though I wanted to go from 0 to 60, new businesses thrived with baby steps, and since I didn't have any financial backers, I had total freedom to do what I wanted. But I had to pay for it myself. I wanted it all, everything, right now. Patience, patience, I mumbled like a mantra.
Mr. Cross, Sarah Rostakowski is online too, my receptionist called from the outer office.
Thanks, I yelled back. Next time, use the intercom.
Sorry, sir.
I picked up the phone and pressed the button. What's wrong, Sarah?
Hey, I just thought you should know. Sergeant Renwin resigned today. He cleaned out his desk and left.
Any idea why?
According to the lieutenant, Renwin's tired of the city, so he's going home.
But he's from here. I reached into the drawer and pulled out the dossier I made.
Well, sort of. He grew up in the suburbs. His mom still lives in his childhood home. He wants to be close to her.
It's 20 minutes away. It didn't make sense.
Hey, I'm just telling you what I heard. The point is, you wanted him off the force, and he's gone.
She lowered her voice.
Did you have anything to do with that?
Not me, unless he came under pressure because of the TRO.
I don't know. I heard there was a discussion about allowing him to continue to carry, but I don't know what they decided. Without a gun, he couldn't leave the station. He'd have to work dispatch or stay behind a desk, maybe fulfill a civilian role. I think that's why he quit.
He did it to himself.
If he's as bad as you say, then good riddance. The last thing any of us needs is another misogynistic asshole beating up women.
Thanks for the heads up. The news left a bad taste in my mouth. I called the security specialist stationed at the diner and told him to remain vigilant. Then I asked Justin if I could borrow his car and headed to Scott's apartment. Parking a few blocks away, I remained crouched in the seat, watching the former police sergeant load boxes and furniture into the back of the pickup. He dragged Jade's futon to the dumpster. Then he loaded a few more boxes into the cab and got behind the wheel. Once he drove away, I went to his apartment and knocked on the door. No one answered, so I tried the knob. The door opened without protest. The apartment was empty. No furniture, no boxes, nothing. He took everything. He wasn't coming back. After speaking to the landlord, I was assured this wasn't a ploy. Scott quit his job and gave up his apartment. On the way back to the office, I made several calls to area storage rentals. Scott didn't rent a unit. He actually left the city. But I didn't believe it. I called Almeida, who promised to look into the matter. Since Scott had a change of address, he was required to notify the court since he had mandated anger management sessions. If nothing else, Scott's lawyer would have his forwarding address. However, I wasn't one to wait. Call it impatience or attributes of a workaholic, but I'd find the answers faster on my own. Plus, I'd have to see it to believe it. I returned Justin's car to the office and scoured the internet until my vision blurred. Around 10 that night, I drove to the suburbs. Mrs. Renwin lived in a quiet neighborhood. Scott's truck took up the length of the small driveway. The furniture and boxes hadn't been unloaded. Despite the time, the blinds remained open, and I could see Scott and a woman sitting at the kitchen table. Two thoughts formed simultaneously. First, Jade was finally free. And second, that bastard better not lay a hand on his mother. Unwilling to accept the win, I found a house for rent at the end of the street and parked in the driveway. I kept my eyes on the Renwin's place until Mrs. Renwin left the next morning. Starting my engine, I followed her to the supermarket. I didn't have a plan. In fact, I had no idea what I was doing. I parked near her car and peered into the windows as I passed. I didn't know what I hoped to find, but it wasn't there. Following her through the store, I pushed a cart and spent a lot of time reading the ingredients on a box of cereal. She didn't notice me. I went down the next aisle, grabbing some paper towels and a box of matches. "Excuse me," I said, bumping into her cart. She looked up, smiling warmly, a gesture her son appeared incapable of performing. "It's all right." I turned up the charm and asked her if she could tell me where I could pick up some flowers. "They have a floral section near the bakery." She pointed to the other end of the store. "Are you shopping for anyone special? Your wife or girlfriend?" "Actually, I was on my way to visit my mom. She doesn't get out much, so I bring her groceries every week and thought I'd get something to brighten her day." "You're a good son." "I try." Quickly, I assessed her, hoping to find an opening to ask her about her own son. "Do you have any idea what she might like? I can't decide between a plant or flowers. The plant will last longer, but the flowers are prettier." "Whatever you get, she will love." She stepped closer, and I crouched down to hear her better. "I'm not much of a plant person. My Scotty usually just brings something sweet for us to eat." "It sounds like he has the right idea." "The cakes here are delicious, especially the Rocky Road one if you like chocolate. In fact, Scotty brought one over last night." "I'll have to check those out." I turned back to the shelf, grabbing a box of tissues and glancing up to read the signs. "Sounds like the two of you are close." "I have a lot to make up for. I'm lucky we have this time to catch up." Chapter 25. The following night I went to KC's and spoke to Will, Melody, and some of the regulars. As far as they knew, Scott was gone. He wanted to start over and reinvent himself. Their stories differed, as one would expect from rampant rumors and gossip, but everyone agreed he left and didn't plan on returning. When I spoke to Almeida the next morning, he said, "According to Scott's attorney, all future correspondence will be sent to his mother's address. Looks like we won." "What did we win?" "Don't be so literal. Jade gets peace of mind, and you can get back to your plans for world domination." "Scott's not that far away. Without traffic, he can be back to the city in 20 minutes. This doesn't mean a damn thing." "You don't get it, Cross. Sure, he's close, but he won't be getting his coffee or bagel from his usual spot. He won't be riding the trains or buses. It's unlikely he'll cross paths with Jade now that he doesn't live in the city." "If you say so." I could practically hear Almeida roll his eyes. "But I'm leaving a protection team at the diner, just in case." "That's your dime. Just make sure she doesn't think you're stalking her." "I'm not," Almeida laughed. "I'm joking. Lighten up." I growled at him and hung up. After my meetings for the day, I called Jade. She had been in contact with one of the shelters. They found her an apartment and a roommate, another woman who'd escaped an abusive relationship. The roommate worked at the shelter and mentored other abused women. It sounded like an ideal situation.
I told her I'd check out the place after my shift, and if I like it, I can move in this weekend.
That's fantastic. I picked up a pen. What's this lady's name?
Why?
Am I overstepping if I say I want to run a background check?
Yes, but I'd appreciate it.
She gave me the woman's name and address.
I'll call you when I leave her place. I thought maybe we could get dinner. I want to properly thank you for everything you've done to help me.
That's not necessary.
Please, she whined. It's the least I can do.
Okay. That was the first night Jade went out since escaping Scott. We sat in the corner booth near an emergency exit and shared fajitas and drank way too much tequila. Unlike me, Jade wanted to celebrate her freedom. She missed living, or so she kept saying. She missed being carefree and fun. She missed herself. She had lost who she was along the way, and now she was tired of the person she had become. She hated being afraid, but it didn't keep her eyes from darting to the door every time someone entered the restaurant. "He's gone," I said finally.
I know. Mr. Almeida gave me the news this afternoon. It's why he said it was safe to go out on my own.
How's work?
Fine. Scott never stopped by. The only time a police officer came inside was to order a sandwich to go. I didn't recognize him.
Well, the police department employs thousands of men and women. You won't recognize most of them.
You're right.
She brushed her fiery red hair behind her ear.
I'm ready to put this behind me. I don't want to talk about it or think about it anymore.
She held up a set of keys.
I told Mary Beth I wanted to share the apartment, if she'd have me. She said yes.
That's great. Those teal eyes burned into my soul.
You should tell that to your face.
I forced a smile to my lips. I do think it's great, see? I picked up the shot glass and tipped it back. Everything checked out. Mary Beth's clean, the neighborhood's safe. Just don't get stuck. You said you didn't know what you wanted to do yet, so keep your options open.
I will.
Okay. When the check came, I reached for my wallet, but Jade swatted my hand.
This is my treat, remember?
She counted out some crumpled bills, probably her tip money from today, and paid for dinner. You didn't have to do that.
Yes, I do, and I am planning to pay you back. Just let me get some things together first.
No rush? I called for a car to pick us up. Despite the fact the danger was removed, I felt uneasy. It would pass eventually. Just not tonight.
Explain something to me. What kind of PI takes a case without getting paid, incurs a ton of expenses, and wages war with the police department?
The kind who doesn't know what he's doing. Like I told you when we met, I just opened my security firm. This was my first and only investigation. Hell, I wasn't even licensed when I agreed to help you. Just don't report me. She stared open-mouthed at me.
I'm glad you didn't tell me this in the coffee shop. I wouldn't have trusted you.
You didn't trust me. I watched her closely. You still don't.
I don't trust anyone, Lucien. Not completely, but I'm working on it. I'd like to trust you.
The way she licked her lips and brushed her hair away from her face made me yearn for that trust and whatever benefits might go along with it. But that wouldn't be professional. I could lose my license. Maybe. Actually, I didn't know, especially since she wasn't a paying client. However, that would probably make it worse. Either way, it didn't matter. That was the tequila talking. When we arrived at the apartment, I walked her to her door. She unlocked it, and I stepped inside to make sure it was safe. Once I knew the coast was clear, I bid her good night and had the driver take me home. Leaving is the right thing to do, I kept telling myself. But had I not been so distracted, I might have noticed the car parked at the end of the street. Chapter 26. I'd gotten home 3 hours ago, convinced I'd fall asleep the second my head hit the pillow. Instead, I stared at the ceiling. The tequila must have triggered my insomnia. I thought about getting up to work, but I didn't feel like it. My thoughts lingered on Jade. When the phone rang, I reached for it, figuring an ex-girlfriend wanted to hook up for the night. The number on the display sent chills through me. "What's wrong?" I asked, already out of bed and rapidly dressing.
"I heard a noise at the window. I thought I saw him."
"Scott." I zipped my fly and secured my holster. "Did you call building security?"
"Yes."
"What did they say?" I grabbed my keys and ran to the elevator. Jade inhaled a shaky breath.
"They didn't see anyone. A couple of guys went outside to look around, and someone else is checking the security feed."
"Did anyone call the police?"
"I don't know. I didn't want to, but they might have."
"All right, I'm on my way. Where are you? Are you in the apartment?"
"No, I'm sitting in the security office."
"Okay." The guards inside the building were armed. They'd keep Jade safe.
"Lucien, don't hang up."
"I'm not. I'm right here." I put the phone on speaker, relieved I'd gotten my tires fixed since I returned the rental car several days ago. The apartment where Jade was staying was on the 3rd floor. It didn't have a fire escape or balcony. "Where do you think you saw Scott?"
"Standing on the corner, across the street."
"Did you see his truck?"
"No."
What did his mother drive? I racked my brain, but in my frazzled state, I couldn't think what kind of car it was. "What about a silver 4-door? Jade repeated the question, presumably to the security guard.
"There are 6 parked on the street. Can you be more specific?"
"Hang on." I tried to enter the vehicle search in my phone, but I couldn't do it while on a call. Not to mention, I shouldn't be doing that while driving. "I don't know. Do you know what his mom's car looks like?"
"You know, I never met his mother."
Jade's tone sounded odd.
"That should have tipped me off. What kind of man doesn't want you to meet his mother?"
I wouldn't want to bring anyone home to my mother, but I didn't share that thought. Approaching the apartment, I drove up and down the street, checking each vehicle, but I didn't recognize any of them. "I'm on my way in. I'll see you in a sec." Disconnecting, I phoned the precinct, reported a disturbance, and entered the lobby. The night manager recognized me, gesturing to the security office in the back corner. Nodding, I knocked on the door before opening it.
"Hey,"
Jade said, relief flooding over her. "It's okay," I said quietly before turning my attention to the guard. "All right. What do we know?"
"Mr. Cross?"
He slid his chair over, and I leaned over his shoulder, checking the monitor.
"As you can see, the building hasn't been breached. We didn't spot any suspicious activity outside."
His radio squawked, and he picked it up, listening to the all-clear message come from the 2 guards he sent outside to patrol. He looked sympathetically at Jade.
"Is it possible you were dreaming?"
"I don't know,"
she admitted.
"I was in bed when I heard tapping at the window."
"Tapping? Like a bird?" I asked.
"Not really. It was quieter and not nearly as consistent."
The guard gave me a look, and I glowered at him. "Let's speak outside for a moment." I practically pushed him into the lobby. "You're probably right to assume she imagined it, but we're taking precautions anyway. Mr. Almeida told you to expect as much, so don't act surprised or put out. I called the police and reported a disturbance. When they show up, I'll speak to them, but I suspect they'll have questions for you and your guys. Answer them truthfully." I held out a photograph of Scott Renwin. "This is who we're looking for. He might even show up in a police uniform, so we're going to be careful and smart about this. Understand?"
"Whatever you say, sir."
I narrowed my eyes. Building security thought I was a joke, but I didn't have the time or energy to rip him a new one. "Fine, just let us know when the police get here, and please cooperate with them. Until then, Miss McNamara and I will wait in her apartment. Let's just hope I don't have to report this to her lawyer in the morning." That got his attention.
"Yes, sir."
I led Jade upstairs, wary of our surroundings. She opened her mouth to apologize, but caught herself and laughed. Once inside, I checked the hidden cameras I set up near the doorway. Since there was only one way in and out, I knew no one had gained entry. "Which window?"
"The one in the kitchen," she pointed. "I was in bed, but I couldn't sleep."
I know the feeling.
"What keeps you up?"
The question sounded innocent, but her lips quirked mischievously in the corner. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe I was still drunk or dreaming. Either way, the question didn't require a response. Checking the kitchen window, I turned off the lights and peered out the slats in the blinds. But I didn't see anything.
What did it sound like? A pebble hitting the window.
How many times did it happen?
3 or 4. I wouldn't have gotten up to check if it was just once.
But I didn't see any pebbles on the ledge or cracks in the glass. I rummaged around the rest of the kitchen, wondering if something else might have made the sound. I even checked for leaky faucets. The intercom buzzed, and I went to the door. "Yes?"
"Mr. Cross, you wanted me to let you know when the police arrived?"
"I'm on my way."
"The police?"
Jade swallowed, ready to bolt. "Shh," I soothed. "I want them to take a look around. Paper trails, remember?" She nodded, but didn't look convinced. "Stay here, lock the doors. I'll be back soon." After I spoke to a few patrolmen and explained the situation, they promised to keep an eye out, but no one had seen Scott, or anyone else, lurking around outside. The only people who'd entered the apartment building lived here, and the cars parked outside all had permits. If I had other investigators working for me, I'd have sent one of them to keep an eye on Mrs. Renwin's house and make sure Scott was there. But I didn't. Instead, I called my assistant at 3 a.m. and asked him to drive over and see if anything appeared out of place. Justin threatened to quit, something he did on occasion to remind me I was an insufferable prick, but agreed to go. I went back upstairs and let myself into Jade's apartment. It's normal to be anxious. A lot has changed. But no one's seen anything suspicious. She nodded.
"I know. I didn't mean to drag you out in the middle of the night, or involve the authorities, or drive building security crazy.
Considering how much Reeves and Almeida spend on this place, building security can get over it." I gave her a reassuring smile. "You're safe. He isn't out there, but just to make sure, I sent Justin to drive by his mom's house and make sure everything looks normal."
"Okay."
30 minutes later, he called and told me everything was quiet. Scott's truck remained in the driveway, and he spotted a car parked inside the garage. I didn't want to know what he did to find that out, but I thanked him, told him to take the day off, and promised a nice bonus in this week's check. "I should go. You need to get some sleep." I looked out the window a final time. "No one's coming for you tonight." Before I could turn around, she ran her palms down my arms.
"Don't leave me alone, Lucien."
"Jade, you'll be okay. You don't need me to stick around."
"What if I want you to?"
"I guess that's a different story." I didn't instigate. I didn't touch her. I let her take the lead. She wanted to regain control of her life. She deserved to be pleasured, worshipped, and made to feel special and safe. So, for the rest of the night, I let her use my body however she desired, and I enjoyed every minute of it. Chapter 27. The sheet skimmed her alabaster skin. Her face relaxed. The worry and tension erased as she slept, making her appear younger, more like the woman from the photo. For the first time, I noticed a few faint freckles dotting her nose, brought out by the red of her hair. I didn't touch her. Even after the night we had, I knew she wouldn't appreciate the contact. I hoped one day she'd be able to accept affection without fear. Silently, I got out of bed and dressed. It was 7. I should be on my way to the office, but for the first time in my life, sneaking out of someone's apartment didn't feel right. Luckily, I told Justin to take the day off, so he couldn't give me grief about this. After sending a text to my receptionist to reschedule my morning meetings, I made coffee and checked the fridge. The bare shelves stared back at me, so I ordered breakfast from the cafe down the street, left Jade a note that I'd be right back, and went to pick up our food. The neighborhood looked different in the daylight. Less menacing, more family-friendly. Several women pushed strollers down the sidewalk. A few men walked dogs, and a couple of joggers ran past. I tried to get out of the way, bumping into one jogger with a hoodie. "Oh, sorry," I muttered, but he just kept going. After picking up breakfast, I stopped by the security office to make sure nothing else happened during the course of the night, but the men I'd spoken to had gone home, replaced by the next shift. Since no police cruisers were parked outside, I assumed they didn't find anything either. However, our city's finest had better things to do than worry about prowlers or the cause of unknown disturbances. Reaching into my pocket, I didn't find my set of keys to the apartment. I must have left them on the counter next to my phone and coffee. Obviously, Jade screwed my brains out. I chuckled, not wanting to knock on the door and wake her, but she might wonder where I was. After debating for far too long, I finally knocked. "Jade," I said. "It's me." She came to the door in a towel, her hair wet from the shower. "You didn't have to get breakfast." It seemed only fair. Fighting the urge to kiss her, I did my best to appear charming as I set the containers on the counter. She went into the bedroom to dress, and I stared out the window. She was right. All the silver cars looked alike from here. When the hairdryer stopped, I pulled plates from the cupboard and put them on the table. Then I made her a fresh cup of coffee. While it brewed, I cleaned up the mess I left, putting my phone in my pocket and hooking my holster to the side of my belt. Frowning, I checked my pockets again. "What's wrong?" she asked, stepping into the kitchen. "I can't find my keys." "Did you leave them in the bedroom? I thought I saw your watch on the nightstand." "I'll check." Just as I moved past her, she grabbed the front of my shirt and pulled me into her for a kiss. "Good morning." "Good morning," she whispered. I went into the bedroom, finding my watch where she said it was. While I fastened it around my wrist, I looked in the nightstand drawer and beneath the bed, but I didn't spot my keys. Maybe I left them in the security office last night, but I was almost certain I unlocked the door. "Did you find them?" "No." Missing keys posed a problem. Despite the doorman and building security, the attached fob could get anyone inside the building. This wasn't good. "I know I had them last night." I checked the recorded footage from the cameras I set up inside the apartment. I was the only person who entered or left. "I'll check downstairs and see if security has them." "It can't wait until after breakfast?" Jade asked. "It'll only take a minute." I went out the door and retraced my steps, wondering if I had dropped them along the way. When the elevator door opened in the lobby, I stepped out. 2 women in yoga gear stood near the doors chatting, and a jogger stretched just outside the doors. I spoke to the manager, but he didn't see my keys. "Let me know if someone finds them." Next, I knocked on the door to the security office. The guard looked up, snickering. I only left him a few minutes ago.
"Back so soon?"
he asked. He eyed my empty hands.
"I hoped you'd decided to bring me breakfast."
"Next time," I mumbled. I searched the top of his desk and the chair cushions. "Have you seen a set of keys?"
"Yeah, I put them somewhere around here."
Resisting the urge to roll my eyes, I blew out a slow breath while I watched the man rummage around in the filing cabinet.
"Welcome to the Lost and Found."
The sarcastic comment did not improve my mood. 5 minutes later, he produced a fancy set of car keys with a soccer ball keychain. "Those aren't mine." Practically shoving him out of the way, I peered into the drawer as a growing sense of unease built inside me. Damn it! I slammed the drawer shut. "Tell the doorman not to let anyone into the building he doesn't recognize." I patted my pockets again, suddenly remembering the jogger who'd bumped into me. Or did I bump into him? Shit! Leaving the office, I ran to the stairwell, taking the steps 2 at a time. I burst onto the 3rd floor, finding the apartment door open. "Jade?" The apartment looked like it did before I left. "Jade!" I tried again, a desperation clawing at my insides. She wouldn't have left the door open. I checked each of the rooms. She wasn't here, and my car keys were gone. I went around the kitchen counter to grab the tablet and access the surveillance footage, and that's when I spotted the shattered coffee cup. With shaking hands, I played back the footage, knowing exactly what I'd see. Chapter 28. "He's got her. That bastard took her. Get everyone on this now!" I barked into my phone as I ran full speed down the steps. I burst into the lobby, spotting a streak of red just beyond the front door. "Stop them!" The doorman turned to see what the commotion was. "That man in the hoodie, stop him!" I sprinted across the lobby, shoving the chatting women out of my way. The doorman was a few steps ahead of me. The 2 security guards were a few feet behind. But Scott had too much of a head start. He shoved Jade into my car, forcing her across the front seats before getting in. I ran towards them, but he peeled away from the curb, clipping me with the front fender as he barreled down the street.
"Sir, are you all right?" the doorman asked. He stopped pursuit the moment Scott and Jade got into the car. "I called 911.
Tell them to issue a bolo on Scott Renwin. He's driving a black Mercedes. He's with Jade McNamara." I rattled off my license plate number. The police would never find them in time. Scott would ditch the car the first chance he got. I had to get to him first. I called Justin the moment I realized she was gone. He would have already called the police. They should be on their way. He'd tell them everything they needed to know, so I didn't need to waste my time here. Grabbing my phone, I entered my PIN and accessed my car's GPS. Scott had a plan. I'd known it all along. Unfortunately, I didn't know what it was. I couldn't just stand here and watch him get farther away. Jogging up the street, I spotted Mrs. Renwin's silver four-door parked on a side street, concealed behind an SUV. I grabbed my gun, wondering why I didn't shoot the bastard before he drove away. But I didn't think. Why didn't I think? Turning my head, I thrust my gun against the window and reached in to unlock the door. The private investigator who mentored me taught me how to hotwire a car, and after a few attempts, the engine roared to life. Pulling out of the space, I kept one eye on the road and the other on my phone. I had to get to Jade. They were still driving, so I had to assume as long as they were on the road, she was safe. Well, as safe as she could be with an unstable and violent man behind the wheel. Stomping down on the gas, I zipped in and out of traffic. The other vehicles on the road became nothing more than a blur. I ran the red, narrowly avoiding a pedestrian in the crosswalk and a delivery truck heading straight toward me. "Where are you going, Scott?" I looked at the tiny map, hoping to decipher the few street names and route numbers. It didn't look familiar. At first, I thought he might be taking Jade back to his mother's house, but he was headed in the wrong direction. Maybe their apartment? But he was too far east for that. I looked up just in time to slam on the brakes. Angry horns blared, and I swallowed and cursed. Damn light. I waited, feeling Jade slipping away as the seconds passed. I promised I'd keep her safe. I should have never said that. I shouldn't have taken the case. Maybe I should have gone to my father for help. As soon as the light changed, I lurched forward. The sedan bumped and grinded in protest, but I didn't ease up on the gas. By now, Scott had abandoned my car, possibly to switch cars. If he did, I'd never find them. But even getting stuck at a red light didn't put me too far behind. I found my Mercedes parked at a gas station with the doors open. After quickly checking inside, not finding blood or any indication of where Scott might have taken her, I stepped inside. "Have you seen a red-haired woman and a man? They got out of that car?" I pointed out the window. The clerk looked up. "No." I spun around. "What about you?" I asked the guy in a trucker hat. "Yeah, strangest thing. I saw them cross the street and go into that motel," he pointed. "I tried to tell him he left his door open, but it looked like they were in a rush, if you know what I mean." "Call the cops. Tell them to get here now. We have a hostage situation." I didn't know if Scott was armed, but I knew those words would get the police department here quickly. But no matter how fast they got here, I couldn't wait. Jade's life was in jeopardy. After entering the motel office, I went straight to the check-in desk. "What room is this man in?" I showed the clerk a photo of Scott. He just shook his head, so I pulled out my wallet and dumped out my cash. "What room?"
17.
"I need a key."
"Oh, I can't do that."
I drew my weapon and aimed it at him. "Fine." The clerk handed me a key. If Trucker Hat didn't call the cops, the motel clerk would. Marching down the path, I tried to peer into the window, but I couldn't see inside. Scott must know staying in one spot would make him a sitting duck. He knew I'd seen him. Why wasn't he running? I unlocked the door slowly, cracking it open. I listened. Suddenly, a crash sounded from the back of the room. "Jade?" My muscles tensed.
"Him!"
Scott bellowed from the table beside the bed. He had an automatic machine pistol in his hand.
"You left me? For him? I love you. How could you do this to us? Why? Why would you fuck him?"
"Scott, please," she whimpered. She edged backward, knocking the in-room coffee maker off the counter in her haste. The sound made her jump, but it didn't slow him down.
"I gave up everything for you, and you do this?"
"Stay away from her." I moved deeper into the room, intercepting him before he could get close to her. He took a step back, swinging the gun in my direction. You shouldn't be here, Scott. The police are on the way. You need to leave. Now.
You shouldn't be here, he growled. You did this. You poisoned her mind. You made her file the court order.
He shoved the hood of the sweatshirt off his head and stared at me with rage-filled eyes. He'd been outside Jade's apartment all night. She didn't imagine it. She saw him.
I've been watching you, Cross. I knew it. I knew you were fucking my girlfriend. You couldn't find your own woman, so you had to steal mine. Did you really think I was going to sit back and let that happen?
Back off.
Drop your gun, or I'll shoot her, and then you.
She means nothing to me. I don't care. You point that at her, and I'll blow you away. So don't be stupid. Point it at me. Aim at me. He thought for a moment, realizing I posed more of a threat, so he aimed at me while edging closer to her. You don't want to throw your life away. Think about this, man. You got your mom. You have the opportunity to start over, to fix things. You know what happens to cops who end up in prison. Just walk away. We'll pretend this didn't happen, I said.
I'm not going to prison.
He stared at me.
I did my homework on you.
He laughed, an ugly, bitter sound.
No wonder you wanted to bed that bitch.
He moved toward Jade, and I sidestepped, blocking his view. If he wanted her, he'd have to go through me.
You didn't have the balls to make it through the academy, not even with Daddy's help. But it was Daddy's help that kept you from going to prison when you nearly beat that guy to death.
He looked over my shoulder at Jade.
Bet he didn't tell you that, babe.
The anger contorted his already unattractive face into something hideous.
Guess you have a type, huh?
Hey, your problem is with me. That's right, I took your girl, I took your job, I took everything from you, so come on, let's settle this like men. Or are you afraid you can't take me in a fair fight? If I could only distract him, she could get to safety.
Lucien,
Jade whimpered, edging along the counter. I needed to keep him contained between the bed and the wall long enough for her to make it safely out of the room. Right now, she was as far from the front door as possible, and with the machine pistol in his hand, her chances of getting out of the room unscathed, or even alive, were minimal, so I'd have to improvise.
Shut up, woman! Did I tell you to speak?
I hated saying it, but I needed him to believe she didn't act on her own, that it was my fault she left him. It was her only chance of surviving.
I would have ended this in your office, but you wouldn't tell me where you hid her. Now, you're gonna regret it,
Scott sneered.
Wait, Scott, please. Forgive me. I'll go with you. We can go back to the way we were before. The way things were before I met him. Please, she said. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry.
You should be sorry.
His finger remained tensed over the trigger. He had no intention of backing down, and I realized I missed something. Scott Renwyn didn't move back in with his mother. He gave her his things and said his goodbyes. This wasn't an abduction. It was a murder-suicide. Jade, get down, I ordered. Before the words even left my lips, he opened fire. I dove on top of her, aware of the deafening gunfire, her trembling body, and the screams. Everything dimmed, and when the darkness faded, the gunfire stopped. His boots squeaked on the tile floor. Instinct took over, along with some residual police academy training, and I fired in his direction. I tried to aim, but I couldn't lift my arm high enough. The first bullet went into his thigh, and the second went right into his ugly face. Jade? I tried to lift myself off her, but my arms slipped in the blood. Blood. I blinked, seeing several gaping holes in her leg. Jade, hang on. I reached down and pressed against one spot, and that's when I saw the river of red running down my arm. I stared at it, uncomprehending, and then like a bolt of lightning I was hit with a wave of excruciating pain. It took my breath, dimmed the lights, and made thought impossible. My muscles gave out, my nerves fried, my body in shock, but no longer to the point of numbing me. I collapsed on top of her. The last thing I saw was what remained of that asshole's face. Chapter 29.
Clear!
At least I thought I heard someone say it. It sounded like an echo. A faint murmur, followed by a massive convulsion, and my body levitating off the table as the fire burned through me. I gasped.
He's back! Let's get him into surgery before he codes again. How many are we looking at?
8. No, wait, 2 grazes and 1 through and through, so 5. Careful when you roll him. We don't know if his spinal cord's compromised.
I moaned.
He's coming out of it. Push another.
I didn't hear what they said.
Jade, I asked, frantic. Jade?
I didn't even have the strength to open my eyes. Did I even speak out loud? Everything dimmed into nothingness. The next time I regained consciousness, bright white lights blinded me. It took my eyes a few minutes to adjust, and I stared at the speckled tile. A blue plastic thing took up half my vision, but I couldn't figure out what it was. I couldn't move. I just lay there, staring at the floor, wondering where I was and what was happening. And then I drifted off again. A sharp tickle at the bottom of my foot woke me. I jerked my leg, feeling something pull in my back. I was too numb to feel the pain, but somehow I knew it hurt. The blue tube didn't impede my vision this time, and I saw a metal bar and a white sheet. I tried to turn, but I couldn't move off my stomach. Honestly, I could barely breathe, let alone keep my eyes open. "Mr. Cross," a kind voice said, "you're in the hospital. Do you remember what happened?" A man in a lab coat sat on a stool and rolled closer until I could see his face. "I'm Dr. Bashala."
Jade. Where's Jade?
"She's okay. The surgery went well. She's lucky. None of the bullets impacted with her bones. She should be back on her feet soon. The 2 of you were lucky."
Lucky? Are you out of your freaking mind?
The doctor stifled a laugh. "If her boyfriend hadn't found you, you might be dead."
"He tried to kill us."
I tried to push myself up. This time the pain broke through the numbness, and I crumpled against the thin mattress. "Easy. You weren't nearly as fortunate. You need to rest. We'll talk more later."
"The police." I fought to keep my eyes open. "I need to speak to the police? And Almeida."
"They're in the waiting area. Everyone's pulling for you, son. You need to sleep now. Once we get you out of the ICU, you can talk to whoever you want."
"This is bullshit,"
I glared at the police commissioner.
"That's not what happened, and I can prove it. Sergeant Shithead stalked Jade, illegally entered the apartment, abducted her, and shot us both. We weren't attacked by a heavily armed unsub. Scott didn't come to our rescue. He came to kill us. Do you want to know who killed him? I did, and that's why."
Almeida gave me a sharp look, but I ignored it.
"It was self-defense. I have security footage to prove it. This," I gestured disgusted at the statement the commissioner wanted me to sign, "is a cover-up, and I'm not signing it."
"Lucien, you need to think very carefully about your next move," the commissioner warned. "This is a lot of money. It's the best you're going to get."
"It's blood money. You make me sick. Jade didn't sign, and neither am I."
"Your girlfriend should reconsider. With her expenses and medical bills, she could use the money. Or are you planning to support her the rest of your life?" the commissioner asked.
My expression soured further. "You have no right to insert yourself into my life or make my decisions for me. I'm a man, Dad. I can take care of myself, and my relationship with Jade is none of your business. She's not my girlfriend, she's a client."
"Cross," Almeida warned. "Renwin put some contingencies in place. He left some things behind that could confuse a jury."
He flipped through the terms of the settlement.
"Don't forget you threatened the motel clerk with a gun. This is a good deal. Even if we won in court, you'd probably only be awarded a fraction of this. Juries are fickle. I suggest you at least consider taking the settlement. Just imagine what you could do with this kind of money."
Ignoring my attorney, I said, "Do you think you can buy my silence? That you can just pay me to go away again, like you've done my entire life?" I stared at my father, the police commissioner. "It's your job to make sure the men and women under your command protect this city. Police corruption, brutality, violence, murders, they happen. They happen a lot, and you aren't doing a damn thing about it. But somehow you thought I'd be bad for the department. I guess you were right, and I'm about to prove it, even though you made sure I washed out of the academy. You don't have the power to wash this away. I won't let you make that monster out to be a hero just so you can save face."
"Lucien, don't you get it? I wanted better for you than the life of a cop. It's not that you couldn't do the job, but you could do much more if you actually took a moment to explore your options. Now look at you. You're a business genius and driven. You can do whatever you want. This money will let you do whatever you want. You could expand that little security firm of yours, or run a startup. Whatever, the sky's the limit. I spoke to the mayor and the city council. This is the best deal you're going to get. We maxed out the budget to make this happen. Just think about it. I'm not buying your silence. I'm trying to repent for my mistakes."
"Keep trying," I snapped. My father walked out the door, leaving me fuming. I turned my head and stared out the window. Almeida gave me a few minutes to cool off before he said,
"He's right, you know."
"Yeah, I know. But that doesn't mean I have to like it." Chapter 30. "Is everything set?" I asked. "You put Jade's name on the account, right?"
"Yes, Mr. Cross."
"Great. Thanks." I hung up and carefully stretched. Rehab and physical therapy left me sore every day, but I was getting stronger and more flexible. Justin would hate having to relinquish my office back to me next week. I owed him everything. If it weren't for him, Cross Security would have come to a crashing halt, but he kept business booming during these last few months. Drawing up a new contract and giving him a stake in my company felt fitting. I believed in rewarding hard work and loyalty, and Justin earned every penny. My front door opened, and I turned my head, wincing at the sudden movement. A flash of red moved toward me, and I smiled. "Hey, babe." Jade kissed me.
"Sorry I'm late. I picked up an extra shift. How did today go? What did the doctor say?"
"I'm fine. I can go back to work next week." She nodded, her eyes a little sad.
"I guess it's time."
"Hey, it's okay. This is what you want. If you change your mind, you can always come back."
"Are you sure I can't persuade you to come with me?"
She looked hopeful.
"I just don't think staying in the city is a good idea. I spoke to my folks. I need to get away from here, away from him and everything that reminds me of him."
"Even me."
"No, not you."
We talked about it a lot. Jade had been speaking to the counselors at the women's shelter and her roommate. She wanted to piece her life back together, but first she had to figure out who she was. She couldn't do that here, and she didn't need me or anyone else getting in the way. "I set up an account with your half of the settlement."
"Lucien, it's not my money. I didn't agree to the terms. You did. I don't want hush money. I don't want anything from that man. I'm done. I washed my hands of it. But if I decide to one day tell my story, I don't want some court order telling me I can't. This happened to me, and if speaking out will help someone else, then maybe I'll do it."
"Are you mad I took the money?" She shook her head.
"I just don't want any part of it."
"But I heard you talking to Mary Beth. You want to start your own not-for-profit to help victims of domestic violence. You need capital. Why not let some good come from this?"
"Why won't you take no for an answer?"
"Because I'm stubborn like that."
"It's too much. I wouldn't even know what to do with millions of dollars. I want you to take it and invest it in Cross Security. You can do more good than I can. You want to privatize policing. Just imagine how many people you can help."
"I want to do more than that." A dark cloud settled over me. I already pulled strings to get invited to a symposium where several well-respected federal law enforcement and private security officials would be speaking. Since I planned to do this, I wanted to do it right. But I know how to build my business. I'll get there eventually. I don't need your money to do it.
I want you to invest it in Cross Security. You saved my life, Lucien, and my quality of life. I owe you everything.
No, you don't. I handed her the account information for a checking account I opened for her. This is just a fraction of the proceeds. I spoke to a few investment bankers I know. Interest and dividends will be deposited every month. It should be enough to support you until you get started in Colorado. But as soon as you say the word, I will wire you the rest with interest. I don't care that you didn't take the settlement. This is your money. You're just letting me borrow it. I smirked. Just promise me you won't buy a pot shop. She laughed.
I'll try not to.
After dinner, I went with her to the tattoo parlor, where Kai put the finishing touches on the leopard tattoo she got to hide the still-healing scars. The doctors told her to wait, but she couldn't. Seeing the scars every day broke her heart and tore at her soul. She needed to rid herself of Scott Renwin and the terrible memories he left her. It's why she had to leave, and why I couldn't stop her. The next morning I took her to the airport. We didn't speak much, but she held my hand. Something she didn't normally do.
It's like the first day we met.
You've come a long way, I said. You're safe now. She studied me.
Lucien, just be careful. Ever since that day, there's a darkness about you. It scares me. You're angry. You want revenge. The same thing happened to Scott before he turned into a monster. It isn't worth it.
She took my face in her hands.
Don't turn into a monster.
I won't. She smiled.
I guess you're nothing more than a fallen angel.
Wouldn't that make me the devil?
Then find your grace. Forgive and move on.
She smiled bittersweetly.
I have to go.
She leaned close and kissed me. I wrapped my arms around her and felt her hot tears against my cheek.
You're my fallen angel. Don't lose your humanity over this. It isn't worth it. He's done enough, taken enough. Don't let him suck you into the vortex, too.
She stepped back. Scott's dead, Jade. He can't hurt you anymore.
Not me.
She slung her carry-on over her shoulder.
You're waging a war you can't win.
I know what I'm doing.
That's what worries me.
She took a few steps towards the gate.
I'll call you when I land and let you know I'm safe.
I smiled. You better. Want more Lucien Cross? Check out Calculated Risk, a cross-security investigation number 2. This has been Fallen Angel, a cross-security investigation, Book 1. Written by g.k.parks. Narrated by Danny Holt. Copyright 2020 by g.k.parks. Production copyright 2024 by g.k.parks.